You have used ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude in a browser. You type a message, you get a response. Today, you learn to skip the browser entirely and connect to those exact same models directly from your own Python script. That is a fundamentally different level of access, and it unlocks everything. This video has two parts. Part 1 is theory, what closed source LLMs are, where they actually run, what an API key is, what a Python SDK is, and which three providers matter most right now. Part 2 is a live recording showing you how to create API keys and call the models from real Python code. By the end, you will understand the complete picture from your keyboard to the model and back. Let's start with the fundamentals. What is actually happening when you send a message to one of these models? Models like Gemini, Claude, and GPT-4 are closed source. You cannot download or run them on your own computer. They run entirely on the provider's infrastructure, massive GPU clusters owned and operated by Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI. These are not small machines. We are talking about thousands of specialized chips running in data centers around the world. The only way to use these models from code is through an API. Your Python script sends a text prompt over the internet. The model runs on the provider's server, and the text response comes back to you. Your machine does zero computation. All inference happens on the provider's side. Think of it like using a powerful calculator that lives in another building. You type in the question, the result comes back to you instantly. But all the computation happens somewhere else entirely. You never installed the calculator, you just have access to it over a network. There are many LLM providers today. The three largest and most widely used are Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, and this video focuses on these three. Every single LLM call from Python follows the same path, every time without exception. It starts with your script. You write a prompt, maybe a question or an instruction, and hand it to the SDK. Your script passes that prompt to the SDK, which is the official Python library from the provider. The SDK packages the call into a valid HTTPS request. It handles authentication, formatting, and error handling automatically. The SDK attaches your API key to prove your identity. Without the API key, the server rejects the request immediately. The request then travels over the internet to the LLM server, which is the provider's infrastructure, Google's, Anthropic's, or OpenAI's data centers. The LLM server runs the model against your prompt, generates the output tokens, and sends the response back across the internet to your script. The response arrives as a Python object. You read the text from it with one attribute access. The developer writes the first step and reads the last step. The SDK handles everything in the middle. An API key is a unique string that identifies your developer account with the provider. Every request your Python script makes must include your API key. Without it, the server rejects the call immediately, no exceptions. The key tells the provider who you are and tracks your usage for billing. Think of it like a membership card at a gym. You show it on every visit. Without it, you cannot enter. If you lend it to someone, they train on your membership and you pay for it. All three main providers give you a free key to start. You get your Google key at aistudio.google.com, your Anthropic key at console.anthropic.com, and your OpenAI key at platform.openai.com. Each is created through a web dashboard, no payment required to begin. An API key is sensitive. Treat it like a password. If someone else gets your key, they can make requests charged to your account. Never paste it directly into shared code and never commit it to a public repository. The next slide shows you exactly where to go for each provider. SDK stands for Software Development Kit. It is an official Python library published by the provider that makes calling their LLM as simple as a few lines of code. Without an SDK, you would have to write raw HTTP requests manually, setting headers, formatting JSON, handling authentication, writing retry logic, many lines of fragile boilerplate just to send a single message. With an SDK, the call takes 3 to 4 lines. Import a library, create a client with your API key, call one method with your prompt, and read the response text. Think of it like a coffee machine. You could manually grind the beans and pull an espresso shot. That is the raw HTTP approach. Or you press one button and the machine handles everything. Same coffee, a fraction of the effort. Each of the three main providers publishes its own official SDK. Google publishes Google Gemini for Gemini. Anthropic publishes Anthropic for Claude. OpenAI publishes OpenAI for GPT-4o. You install each one with a single pip install command. There are also third party libraries that support multiple providers, but starting with official SDKs gives you the clearest possible foundation. Let's put it all in one place. There are three main providers, and the access pattern is identical across all three. Install the SDK, get your key, create a client, call the model, read the text. Google gives you access to Gemini 2.0 Flash via the Google Geni SDK. Install it with pip install Google Geni and get your key at aistudio.google.com. Anthropic gives you access to Claude Opus 4 via the Anthropic SDK. Install it with pip install Anthropic and get your key at consoleanthropic.com. OpenAI gives you access to GPT-4o via the OpenAI SDK. Install it with pip install OpenAI and get your key at platform.openai.com. One pip install per provider, one SDK per provider, one API key per provider. There are other LLM providers, Mistral, Cohere, Meta, via API, and more, but Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI are where most developers start, and mastering these three gives you access to the world's leading models. Every AI powered application you have ever used is built on exactly this: a Python script sending a prompt to one of these three providers and doing something useful with the response. Let's step back and appreciate the scale of what you are plugging into. Three major providers: Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, each running some of the most sophisticated AI infrastructure ever built. Three Python SDK packages, one per provider, all on PyPI, ready to install in seconds with a single pip command. A typical round trip time from your script to the model is under 1 second. Your prompt travels across the internet, the model generates a full response, and the text arrives back in your Python variable, all faster than a blink, and zero GPUs needed on your machine. All compute is server side. You do not need a gaming PC. You do not need a cloud virtual machine. You do not need anything beyond a standard Python environment. You are renting time on the most powerful AI infrastructure in the world from a standard laptop for fractions of a cent per request. That is the real power of the API model: democratized access to cutting edge AI without the hardware investment. Before we move to the demo, here is the one sentence that ties everything together, the insight that should change how you see every AI product you have ever used. Every AI powered application you have ever used is built on exactly this: a Python script sending a prompt to one of these three providers and doing something useful with the response. That is it. Every chatbot, every writing assistant, every code completion tool, every AI customer support agent, at the core, a script, a key, an SDK, and a response. The sophistication comes from what you do with that response. Once you can make the call, you can build anything. The theory is done. In the next section, you will watch a live recording that shows exactly how to create your API keys from all three providers and how to call the models from real Python code. Get ready. This is where it gets hands on. The theory is done. In part 1, you learned what API keys and SDKs are, where closed source models live, how your script reaches them, and which three providers matter most. Now watch a live recording, creating API keys and using a Python SDK to call the models. Let's watch.
In this section, we'll show you how to access closed source LLM using SDK and API keys. First, we'll create API keys from different LLM providers. Mainly, we are using three LLM providers here: Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI. Once we create those API keys, we'll install different SDK from those LLM providers, and then we'll run the code to access LLM. So this image simply shows how we can connect our Python script from local machine to LLM server. The LLM server is nothing, it's just the server hosting multiple copies of LLM. And this image clearly shows that, right? To pass our message all the way to the LLM server, we need SDK and API keys. And once we set up the SDK and API keys, we can pass our message to LLM server, and the LLM server will pick up the model based on the request, and they generate the output from the server and give the output back. Okay, now let's create API keys from these three different LLM provider. As you can see in this cell number 12, I already created API key and I already put them here. So but here I want to show you like how to create those API key from this URL. So let me first try with OpenAI. When you click this link, we'll reach to this page. And if you have not used it before, perhaps you will see the view different, and then you need to create an account and set up the billing information there. Since my account is already set up, so I can create the API keys from here very easily. So on the right side we can see create API keys option here. So I'll go and create the API key, and I don't need to put the name. If you want to keep the name, give the name something here. So I'm just going and clicking there, and then it will display the API key. So this API key we'll see here the first time, so next time we'll not see this API key. That's why we have to copy it and save it somewhere else securely. So this is how we create the API key from OpenAI. So and then I posted, I kept it already here. So similarly, if you want to go for Anthropic, and then click this link, and this link will be provided, and then just simply click here, and then set up the default one. Then this is the option. Okay, let's give some name here, my test. Okay, this is then copy and then close. Okay, and then again we can paste it here. So since I already created those API key and put it here, so I'm not going to use those API key, but that is how we can create our API keys from this different LLM provider. And here is the link for Google Gemini. Then we can simply click this link and proceed similarly, and then we'll get the API key for Gemini. So now our three API keys are ready to. Okay, next important piece is the SDK, right? And so we are going to use three different LLM providers. That's why we need three different SDK, right? The Google SDK, Anthropic SDK, and OpenAI SDK. I ran this cell multiple times in my environment, so everything is done pretty quickly. So if it is first time you are running, it might take 1 to 2 minutes. Just wait until everything is completed, and then we'll be all set here to pass our request to LLM server. So first let's try with the Google. So first we are importing the SDK, right? We just install it. Now we are importing it, Google SDK, and then okay, and then we define the client object here, and then we are passing the API key. API key is the secret that basically authenticate our request in the server side, right? When we pass your message, first it will check whether we are authenticate user to use the server or not. That's why it is extremely important. That's why it has to be a valid key. And once we set up this client, and then now we'll be able to send our request to the LLM server. This line, basically line number 9 here, send our request and receive the response from the LLM server. So while sending our request, there we are passing two parameters. One is a model, because as I said before, there are multiple version of model or LLM hosted within the server. So this is the one model we are choosing for this particular use case, and here is the prompt that we want to pass to LLM, right? And let me run this cell, and then we'll discuss more here. Yes, so we pass our model selection, and we passed our prompt, and the server process our request, and it gave us the output. The output is recorded in the response object, right? And this response object not only contains the output from the LLM, it contains the other metadata as well, right? Timing, tokens, and who is the user, like all these things. Our input also will be stored here. So but this text contain only the output from the LLM. So based on this input, here is the output LLM gave us, right? Mount Everest. It gave some information about the Mount Everest. So our first run is successful. We passed our question to Google server, and then invoke this particular LLM, and then LLM generate the output and give the output here. So let's move on to Anthropic one. So here is the Anthropic. The process is pretty same, right? Yeah, so I just run this Anthropic one. Here is our prompt, right? And then this is the SDK, and we define the client object with the secret here, and then we pass our like the Claude Opus 4.5 is the model we choose here, and the maximum token we gave 200, and here is the prompt. Basically this is the question we asked to LLM, right? So this question is passed to the LLM server, and then the LLM generate the output, right? And then here is the output for the same question. And if you compare here and there, you can see slightly differently. Each LLM provider store their output slightly differently, right? In the response here, the actual text response dot text, we can see the exact output, but here we can see the message dot content zero dot text, right? So the way they store the output is a bit different, but they are not very different. Okay, the structure wise it's slightly different. And let's go to the OpenAI. It's pretty similar to Anthropic and Google, right? We can see it. Let me run it quickly here. And here is the SDK and the prompt, right? And then our client with the secret, and then we are choosing the GPT-4o model here, and we are passing this prompt, and then here you see the output format is slightly different, right? Response is input as well as output, right? And the choices zero, message and content, and we see the output for the same prompt here. So these are the three different LLM providers, and we created here three different API keys and use respective SDK and pass our message to LLM server and get the output back. So it is a very simple and straightforward way of accessing LLM through the backend development, especially from the Python scripting. Thank you.
Let's recap everything you just learned. Closed source LLMs like Gemini, Claude, and GPT-4 run on provider servers. Your Python script reaches them via an API, not by running anything locally. An API key is your credential with the provider. Get one free from their developer console, never paste it into shared code. A Python SDK, Google Gen AI, Anthropic, OpenAI, turns an LLM call into 3 to 4 lines of Python. Install it with pip, create a client, call the model, read the text, and Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI are the three main providers. Same access pattern for all three, slightly different SDK names. Your next step is simple. Get your free API key from aistudio.google.com and make your first call. In part 2, we go further system prompts, multi turn conversations, and building a Python chatbot from scratch. You now have everything you need to get started.